Good morning, everyone. This morning's scripture reading is found in Paul's letter to the Philippian church, chapter 2, starting in verse 17. As usual, if you didn't bring a Bible, please feel free to use one located under the seat in front of you. If you don't own a Bible, please feel free to take home one of ours as a gift. Again, Philippians chapter 2, verses 17 through 30. Even if I am to be poured out as a drink offering upon the sacrificial offering of your faith, I am glad and rejoice with you all. Likewise, you also should be glad and rejoice with me. I hope in the Lord Jesus to send Timothy to you soon, so that I too may be cheered by news of you. For I have no one like him who will be genuinely concerned for your welfare. They all seek their own interests, not those of Jesus Christ. But you know Timothy's proven worth, how as a son with a father he has served with me in the gospel. I hope, therefore, to send him just as soon as I see how it will go with me. And I trust in the Lord that shortly I myself will come also. I have thought it necessary to send to you Epaphroditus, my brother and fellow worker and fellow soldier, and your messenger and minister to my need. For he has been longing for you all and has been distressed because you heard that he was ill. Indeed, he was ill, near to death. But God had mercy on him, and not only on him, but on me also, lest I should have sorrow upon sorrow. I am the more eager to send him, therefore, that you may rejoice at seeing him again, and that I may be less anxious. So receive him in the Lord with all joy, and honor such men, for he nearly died for the work of Christ, risking his life to complete what was lacking in your service to me. This is God's word.
We started this new church/school year reading through the Apostle Paul's letter to the church in Philippi. It's a letter designed to cultivate maximum joy in us, maximum joy through Jesus Christ. That's like step by step. Here's a way you can have more joy in your life. Now, our last step in this letter was to work out. In other words, God works out his salvation in us. He works in his salvation in us, and we work it out by the way we live, sort of like unfurling a rug, right? You sort of let it all out. You let people see it. And we talked about how our obedience presents this opportunity to light up salvation like a Christmas tree, right? A pine tree is lovely in and of itself. It's enough, it's there, but lighting up a Christmas tree is an opportunity for people to see how beautiful this tree is, how beautiful. Even Charlie Brown, we saw, had an ornament, right, on the tree, on his little tree. So also, by the way we live and the works we do in our lives, we light up what God has done in us. And we call that the theological term sanctification. That's what it's been called throughout time. Now, in this step today, we're reminded that Paul's writing a letter. Right? He's not just writing like bits of theology and what to know about God. It's an actual letter that he's writing. He's writing it from basically house arrest, and that there are these faithful Christians bringing other letters to Paul, and then they're taking letters from Paul and distributing it to other people, to other churches. So he has all these people coming in and out of his house where he's arrested under guard, people coming with letters and going out with letters. Okay, and I kind of think of it like this. You know when you call up a good family member or friend, and usually you get right into the main thing, like, man, here's what's going on. I've been meaning to tell you about this. This is pretty urgent, what's happening. And as you're going through the conversation, usually you hit some sort of lull, and at that point you catch up about the people around you, right? Your roommates, your coworkers, your spouse, your kids, right? You hit the big thing first, and then like, you know, how's little Timmy doing, right? Like, how's Sally? How's your coworker doing? I want to follow up on that, right? And that's the part of the letter we're in. That's the part of the communication we're in. But for Paul, this isn't just a conversation filler like it sometimes feels like when we're on the phone with a family member. It's an opportunity for this church he loves to experience more joy by honoring the very people in our lives who might otherwise get overlooked. To honor those people, and by honoring them, it brings us joy. He mentions 3 types of people God may be calling you to honor today. So we're going to look at all 3 types of people. The first is Paul himself. Paul, an additive to our faith. An additive to our faith. Verse 17, even if I am to be poured out as a drink offering upon the sacrificial offering of your faith, I am glad and rejoice with you all. Now, I know that sounds lovely. It sounds like wonderful religious language, right? What the heck does that mean? Well, let's get into it here. Spendomai is where we get the English word spend, right? That makes sense. In other words, spend yourself, or here translated, poured out. I'm spending myself for you. It's a technical term used in both pagan and Hebrew sacrificial rituals. And what would happen is first, the worshiper would kill the valuable animal and then burn it on the altar. I am very sorry for those of you who deeply love animals. I can't help the fact that this has happened throughout ancient worlds. All right, so you burn this thing on the altar, and then as it's burned on the altar, you take a cup of wine and pour it on top of the sacrifice that's already burning. And because the sacrifice and the altar upon which it is so hot, the libation, the liquid, would disappear into a puff of sweet-smelling smoke. All right, so you would take the wine, pour it on the hot animal, right? It's so hot that it would just disappear in this puff of smoke. And Exodus 29 calls this an aroma pleasing to the Lord. So the reason Paul uses this image is because it's a way of communicating Jesus' sacrifice and your response of faith. That's enough for salvation. Right? That is enough, sufficient for salvation. But it brings me joy to add a pleasing aroma to your Jesus-directed faith for your sake, even if it costs me. Through my teaching, through visiting you and coming and imparting a spiritual gift, through encouraging you. That is this pleasing aroma that I want to give to you. I want you to have more joy. I don't want you to just have salvation. I want you to have more joy in that salvation. And so my laying down my life is just a sweet smell to that already sufficient salvation. Does that make sense? Like he wants to add that to their life. So here's the question for us. Who in your life intentionally adds to and highlights your faith specifically? Who in your life intentionally adds to and highlights your faith specifically? Not just, by the way, your life, but your actual faith. Doesn't just encourage you generally, but they encourage you about how they see faith at work in you. That's what Paul's saying here, because that's what he's doing for the Philippians. So I heard about this runner who was running a marathon that he knew was going to be particularly difficult. All right, it was like his 3rd marathon, and by then he'd already noticed a trend, which is how at the end of these races, the people from the crowd, they're going to call out encouragement, especially when you get to the end. So he had this idea that instead of writing his own name on the bib, that you get for running one of these races, he would write Christian on that. So at the end of the race, people were shouting, "Hang in there, Christian, man. You're doing awesome, Christian. I see you, Christian." Right? Well, who in your life does that for you? Man, I see you. I see you, Christian. You're doing awesome, Christian, in the way you're representing Christ. Like, who does that for you? For me, that's people like my friend Dave Jeffrion over here, who made a point a couple of weeks ago to write me an incredibly kind note about just that. My friend Joel Allen is here this morning, who publicly loves to tease me and rag on me, but also makes a point to highlight faith at work in me, which I'm grateful for. As do my friends Linda and Shelby Dunlap as well, who almost weekly offer me specific joy and encouragement about something I've imparted to them. And by the way, here's the misnomer about encouragement. Here's the misnomer about encouragement, that you can somehow give too much and it'll inflate someone's ego. I see this all the time in marriages. I'm going to tell you, it's one of my pet peeves. When a spouse says, it's a joke, like, "Oh, God gave me to him to humble to humble them, keep them grounded." I hear this all the time, by the way. That my job is to keep them humble, keep her humble, right? God did not give you for that purpose. I just want to say that flat out. Pride is their responsibility, not yours. That's up to them. If they want to feel encouraged, and thank God for you for giving that, and thank God for the good work that you see in them, They should do that. If they want to get prideful about it, that's up to them. People need encouragement. All right, so I'm just going to be straight with you. It's such a pet peeve that, like, if you say around me, if I hear that, like, oh, my job's to humble him, whatever, I'm giving you side eye, like, straight up. Like, I might say something or at least give you side eye for that, because we need encouragement. It's their responsibility what they do with that encouragement. Okay, yeah, you got it. You understand. So when Katie and I planted a church overseas, the first time I was preaching, it was the first time I was preaching every week, first time I was kind of leading a church. And I had these two wonderful encouragements in my life. Two older Baptist pastors who came alongside me to encourage. One, this man named Randy Von Cannell. He was like the island's pastor, the sweetest man. He would always treat me, even though he was decades older with tons more experience, he always treated me like an equal. And he was quick to point out the work of God that he saw in me. Another man named Tabidi, whom I heard at a conference just like a couple years earlier speak to like thousands of people. He was listening to my sermon, this brand new preacher, on Romans, and he was telling me how wise I was in my approach and how I was preaching that to my people. And he listened to like 4 or 5 of my sermons. And I got to tell you guys, because I preached on Romans a few years back, and I went back to look at the old Roman sermons. I got to tell you, they were unusable. They were so bad. I was just like, I was a young preacher. And here's this guy, loads more experiences in preaching, has preached to thousands of people, being like, man, you're so wise in your approach, because he wanted to encourage me and say, hey, I see God at work in you, in your life. So what did I do this week? I wrote those same men on Thursday, and I thanked them for how God used them and their faith to spur me on, which is exactly what Paul says we should do, is to reciprocate to these additives to our faith, the people who add to our faith. He says that in verse 18. Likewise, you also should be glad and rejoice with me. I've done this to you. I've laid down my life for you so you might have more joy. And I've laid down my life to show you how God is working in your life. You should do the same thing for me, just as I've rejoiced and highlighted your faith. So whatever name you wrote down in terms of who does that in your life, and hopefully you wrote something down and you thought of someone, let them know the encouragement and joy you feel because of the way they've added to your faith. All right? Second example we get here in our passage is Timothy. And Timothy is someone that you sense genuinely cares. Someone you sense genuinely cares. So buried in these verses, Paul makes a pretty general statement about people, which is they all seek their own interests. Right, pretty harsh, right? But that can sometimes include people who even seem on the surface like they care. Maybe they listen to a few minutes as you share your moans about life. They might follow up on the doctor's appointment you have or the biopsy you're waiting on, or offer to give you a lift somewhere. Even in those things, though, there can often be a great deal of self-interest, even if that self-interest is helping them feel better about themselves for helping you, right? I call this boomerang love, and I'm raising my hand. I'm guilty of it a lot of times, which is I'm loving you really in order to love myself, right? I help you, but it's really to help my sense of self-worth, right? And Paul says in verse 20 that Timothy's different, for I have no one like him. There are these other people who seek their own interests, right? But I have Timothy, there's no one like him. And literally that's translated, I have no one else like-minded. It's the same word Paul uses back in verse 2 of chapter 2, when he says they're of the same mind, or think the same one thing. And here's the point. For Paul, Timothy is someone who thinks the same one thing as opposed to thinking the same about everything. You see the difference there? You can be partners in ministry and you don't have to think the same about everything as long as you think about the same one thing and its importance, which is Jesus and his love. And that's what Timothy is for Paul. So when Paul sends Timothy, he knows, like himself, man, Timothy's going to be thinking about the same one thing in terms of helping these people, and it's going to be about Jesus and his love. And Paul's saying, I'm confident that when I send Timothy, you're going to be cared for in a way that points you towards Jesus and his love. I know that because he's the same one thing guy as I am. But note the wording here. It says that Timothy will be. He is someone who will be genuinely concerned for your welfare. Look, notice the tense there. It insinuates that Timothy's not perfect. He's not always thinking about you, but when he's present with you, you're his priority. That's the kind of person he is. Paul expounds upon this in verse 22 when he says, when Timothy's with me, he's like a son. He's just focused almost like on me as a spiritual father, fully present, wanting to help me, wanting to be there for me. In fact, to take it a step further, in verse 23, Paul says he's so confident in Timothy's fully present concern for him that he's like, man, I need his presence here. I need his, before I send him to you, Philippians, I need him here first. Tell me, get through this trial that I'm about to face. Because Paul's about to go on trial. Because Timothy's the kind of guy, he's fully there for me. When he's there, he's fully there. Who makes you feel like you're the only person in the world who matters in the moment? Who is that person for you? Write their name down. I encourage you. Who is that person who makes you feel like in the moment you're the only person who matters? And when they are with you, they are like 100% present with you. Who is that person for you in your life? Or persons? Write their names down. For me, I can tell you in this church alone, my friend R.J. Kisling is like that for me. Gene Hicks, Nick Ross are some of the people that come to mind that when they are present, man, they are fully present. They are all in on caring for me in that moment, and I'm so grateful for that. One more example here is Epaphroditus. Epaphroditus. Fun name, right? Anyone name a kid Epaphroditus? We started our service this morning celebrating adoption. Matthew, they did not choose the name Epaphroditus. They actually asked about names to choose. I remember that. And I did not mention him as one of those, thankfully. I would have been, that's a tough nickname. Epaphroditus. I mean, what do you call this guy, right? But he is a reliable brother or sister, brother in this case, but any reliable brother or sister. Someone who doesn't think they are above helping or serving in any way possible, no matter how small it is. It's interesting because Paul calls him a minister to my need, which may have been something simple like retrieving a scroll for Paul. In other words, going to get a book for Paul, sharpening a quill, fetching a papyrus so he can write someone. Even as he calls him a fellow worker, who, meaning he was someone capable of sharing the gospel and sharing how the gospel mattered to people's lives. Like he could do all that stuff. And yet he calls him your messenger. He was the deliverer of Paul's letter, a human mail carrier, like just above a carrier pigeon. There's Epaphroditus in this role. So what liberates a capable someone like Epaphroditus from self-importance? From saying, you know what? I'm a little above that. Because we're all capable of that part, right? Let me call your attention to the very first title Paul assigns Epaphroditus, and that is brother. Now, I love the word brother. I use it pretty liberally. And sometimes the people who may or may not know Jesus, I'm like, brother. What's up, brother, right? It's just fun to say. It's a great like moniker for people. But we need to appreciate how revolutionary this word was in Paul's day. As one commentator pointed out, some aspects of ancient life bore resemblance to Christian brotherhood, but even with those, at best, they are all exclusive. It was like an exclusive club. So he gives the example of like Roman soldiers who are bonded together in a kind of brotherhood, but it's exclusive. If you're not a soldier, if you don't know how to fight, you're excluded from this club. And there were all these kinds of associations back in the ancient world, just like the modern day like country clubs today, or that weird club in Occidental called the Bohemian Grove. Right? I'm not even sure what it is, but it's scary. It scares me. If you're part of that, please don't kill me afterwards. All right. You probably could. But these class divides, they were so stringent. There was little social mobility back in the day of Paul's time. Like people didn't go from class. Like you were a part of this class, and that's who you were. But Jesus came along and he demolished all those divides. He rid of them fully. And he said, you are like, he even called himself a brother to us, even though he's the Lord of the universe. So that someone educated and skilled like Epaphroditus, he just sees the church in Philippi as family. You guys, they're just family for whom I'm willing to do anything, big or small. Even though I'm skilled, even though I'm a fellow worker, even though I do big things, I'll just deliver a letter if that's what I got to do. And that's what he did. Just as Jesus was willing to do anything for him. Furthermore, he's one of these people who carries on when you and I think the task is completed. Look at verse 30. In his sickness, this guy nearly died to complete what was lacking in his service to me. So he's sick, and he still shows up. He risks his life, and he still shows up, right? I mean, a lot of us could take it example from that. But I remember our last church work day, it was like a month or so ago. We had this church work day here to like do some things on the grounds, improve our building, and a lot of us got together. From 8:30 to 11 a.m. was the time frame. And I remember I was there past 1. And I remember this because I was looking at my watch, and I was kind of giving myself a mental pat on the back. Like, hey, yeah, way to go, Ryan. I stayed all the way to completion. And as I was leaving, I saw 3 other cars in the parking lot who'd done the same thing, who were still at it. And they were all volunteers. I'm actually paid by the church, right? And I know that mattered not in the least to those brothers and sisters who stayed behind. They weren't above staying late. They didn't want to get any credit for it. I don't even know who those people were, but they were there. Who in your life is probably still at it and would drop anything to help you if you needed it? Who is that in your life? Who would drop anything to help you if you needed it? A reliable brother or sister. For me, I'll give you 3 names in this church who are like that for me. My friend Eric Haggard is like that. My friend Bob Nagy is like that. Meg and Bob Phelps. Those are 4 names, sorry. But as Paul was with Epaphroditus, I'm confident of their reliability because they have dropped everything to help me, to serve me. I'm grateful for that. And all these names, by the way, I've mentioned Dave, Joel, Linda, Shelby, RJ, Gene, Nick, Eric, both Bobs, Meg. Even as I say their names again, like I'm filled with this abundance of relational joy. Just as you may be filled with that joy as you've written down some names or thought of those people. And in a nutshell this morning, here's the message. Display joy by honoring. Paul says it here as an imperative in verse 29. With all joy, honor such men, he says. Honor them. An imperative, like it's a command, like you need to honor them. Like actually do it with joy. Look again at those names you wrote down. I'm telling you, you are filled with joy as you either wrote them down or they're mentally in your mind as you go through them. So display that joy by honoring them. Here's some practical ideas you can use to honor people. Offer to babysit their kids. All right? Here's another one. Ask their kids names and pray for them every day, whether their kids are adults or kids or young kids. Right? Our adult children need prayer, and so many of you know that. Quarter of life. And there may be no better way, by the way, to serve and honor people than praying for their children. Like, it is an amazing feeling to know your kids are being prayed for by someone else other than just you, that others are sharing in that burden. I got to tell you, maybe you want to snail mail someone a note. It's a rare gift in these days, like, right, to write a note out and then send it to a person. Maybe buy them a gift. And if you don't know what to get them, like, get your favorite book and give them to them. And even if they don't like that book, I guarantee you they'll appreciate the gesture. As you say, this is my favorite book, and I appreciate you, so I want to give it to you. Invite them over or take them out. Invite them over for dinner or take them out for dinner. If you think that would honor them. If you wonder, would that honor them? Give them a gift card somewhere. These are all ways we can honor those people that are on our minds and for whom we want to give thanks and joy. And Paul is saying here, display that joy by honoring them. Epaphroditus risked his life to complete what was lacking in your service to me, Paul says. Now, I want to be really clear here, and this is an important point here as we close. He's not blaming the Philippians for not completing that service. It doesn't read that way. You're like, wait a minute, what did the Philippians fail to do? Did you read that? That's how I first read it, but that's not what he's doing. In fact, in chapter 4, if you keep reading this letter, he makes that explicit. He says, not that you guys didn't complete, you guys just didn't have any opportunity. Like, we lost touch for a while. That's not on you. You had no opportunity, he's very clear, to help me in these ways. The reason that's important is when Paul says he risked his life to complete what was lacking in your service for me, it's very reminiscent of something Paul says elsewhere, Colossians 1:24, which is up here on the screen, where Paul says, now I rejoice in my sufferings for your sake, and in my flesh I'm filling up what is lacking, that's the same language there, in Christ's afflictions for the sake of his body, that is the church. This is a very peculiar verse. easily be misinterpreted as saying that Jesus' suffering and death wasn't enough, that it's lacking. And that is not what Paul's saying. He's not blaming Jesus for not doing enough, just as he's not blaming the Philippians for not doing enough. Paul is saying that Jesus could only suffer and lay down his life at one place, at one time, in one role. Right? Jesus couldn't lay down his life as an apostle in 62 AD because Jesus wasn't around. But Paul could. Paul could lay down his life as an apostle, but Paul couldn't lay down his life as a mother. Right? We understand why. Maybe you can't. I know I can't lay my life down in that particular way. I can lay down my life as a member of this church. I can lay down my life as a husband, as a father, as a volunteer police chaplain, as a volunteer referee of third graders of the Boys and Girls Club, right? These are ways I can lay down my life, but we all lay down our lives in different ways, is what Colossians is saying. And in that way, we fill up what Christ has already done. The people of God get to fill in the margins of Christ's sufficient sacrifice. So we have this opportunity to fill in for the sake of Christ at specific times and places and lay down our lives for people. And so fill in that margin. What a privilege, right? And someone in your life has laid down their life for you and filled in around the margins of Christ's sufficient sacrifice. And in doing so, they've made Jesus and what he's done somehow more real than it already is for you. So I want to encourage you, don't wait. Take a step to honor that person even today. Let's pray. Jesus, we are thankful for your all-sufficient sacrifice in our life. We're thankful that you laid down your life for us so that we might have life. And that is enough for us. But what Paul is saying here is we have opportunities as the people of God to kind of fill around the margins, to highlight, to light up what you've done for us. And others have done that in our lives. Father, they've kind of filled in the margins. They have made this fragrant sacrificial offering to make what we do more joyful, to spur us on, to help keep us going. Honor such people, Paul says here. Help us, Jesus, not neglect honoring such people. Help us not just assume, oh, they already know. They know they're appreciated. They know they're loved. They know what they've done for me. No. Paul says, tell them again. Make sure that they know. Because we need that in life. We need that encouragement. And we need to be spurred on in our love for Christ. It's in Jesus' name.